Welcome back to Biblio Files, a show from the Ann Arbor District Library in Michigan that's all about books. Each episode, we take a few minutes to answer one book-related question. And I'm here, as always, with Lucy and Amanda, and I'm Christopher. This time, we're answering the question, what are two books that have something to say to each other? Two books in conversation with each other. Lucy, what did you pick for us?
So I had a hard time narrowing this down because I feel like my brain is always kind of making these books just talk to each other in my brain. So I finally just kind of pulled two out of there. And the first book is a book called Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. And this book came out this year in 2021. And I loved this book. It is fictional, and it's about a woman who is an artist, and she's a mom, and she hasn't made any art since her son was born 2 years ago. And she really hates having lost this part of herself. Her husband travels for work, and she just feels like motherhood kind of consumes her. And she feels inadequate compared to the other moms in the mommy group. She's just totally lost herself in motherhood, and she feels like something has to give. She's at this breaking point. So she becomes a dog. She doesn't choose to become a dog. This just sort of happens over time. Like, she starts roaming around at night, and she's realizing parts of her changing at night. She starts trying to eat raw meat. She feeds raw meat to her son. She sort of becomes feral at night, running around with other dogs, and she gets her son finally to sleep. He hasn't slept since he's been born, in a crate in her room, and he loves it. So it sounds really weird. It's actually really funny, but it's also this like really biting commentary on motherhood and womanhood and this sort of cage of patriarchy, and how, like, despite being this accomplished artist and working really hard before becoming a mother, this woman finds herself in a life that's totally unrecognizable to her. And it doesn't shy away from like that anger and loneliness that women can feel when they're new mothers. And it's just this very visceral way to show how you can lose yourself in that identity and how it can consume you. And the book that I was reminded of while I was reading it, and I feel like they were very much in conversation, is a book called The Vegetarian, which came out in 2015. It's a Korean book. It was translated, and it's by a woman named Han Kang. And it's kind of the opposite, but it's also the same. So the first sentence of this book, the beginning is narrated by this woman's husband. The first sentence is, "Before my wife turned vegetarian, I thought of her as completely unremarkable in every way." So there's this woman who's married. She's not ambitious. She doesn't have anything that sort of like sticks out about her. She just does what she's supposed to do. And she starts having these really bloody nightmares. And all of a sudden she throws out all the meat in their house. And the nightmares become intrusive thoughts, and she stops eating meat. And in like following Korean etiquette, this is just completely monstrous to become a vegetarian. She is so shunned, and she just starts to withdraw because she's bucking these cultural expectations so much. And she becomes more plant-like. And the more she withdraws, she loses weight. She just starts becoming more and more like a plant. And so both of these books, I feel like, are this sort of feminist allegory for what could befall a woman who wants to rebel against the cultural norm that the patriarchy has decided should be her role. And they're different in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say The Vegetarian is particularly funny. It's kind of dark and gory. Night Bitch is definitely funny, but I just felt when I was reading Night Bitch, the Vegetarian kept popping up in my mind. So those are the two books that I felt were in conversation with each other. Amanda, what did you pick?
Well, first of all, I am fascinated by those two books. And I think those are classic examples of books that are speaking to each other or of each other. So I love it. I went in a completely different direction. I chose two youth fiction books. Both are adventurous survival stories featuring a wild animal and a 12-year-old protagonist. The first book, I'm just going to tell you both. The first book is called The Wolf Wilder by Catherine Rundle, and she writes a lot of really great middle grade books. She wrote Cartwheeling in Thunderstorms and Rooftoppers, which I mentioned on the show. I love her writing. And then the other book that I chose was Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. So wild animal and a 12-year-old. Let me tell you about the Wolf Wilder first. So the Wolf Wilder is set in 1917 in snowy Russia, and 12-year-old Fyodora and her mother Marina are wolf wilders. They take tamed animals and teach them how to fend for themselves and go back into the wild and survive. So in the days before the Russian Revolution, aristocrats raised captured wolf pups to act as dogs, but some of them go mad. And when they do, they are sent to Fyodora and her mother to be trained to live back in the wild. But there are some orders that come through, and Fyodora's mother doesn't want to comply. And so her mother, Marina, is taken away. So Fyodora is left on her own, the 12-year-old child, to fend for herself. So her and her best friends, her few pack of wolves, I think there's 3 of them, and they set off on a treacherous adventure to go find her mother and rescue them from the horrible Saranese people who took her mother away from her. So it's an adventure story. You've got a very, very strong. The author writes these really great, strong female, like young heroines that are just so strong and fierce and really amazing. And the writing is gorgeous. So that's Wolf Wilder. And Wolf Wilder came out in 2015, and then Pax came out in 2016. And I feel like Pax was more popular or more well-known. It was on all the lists, and lots of kids have read it. It also features a 12-year-old. This time it is a young boy named Peter. And Peter, around the time that his mother died 5 years ago, he found and rescued and kept this little fox. It's a fox, a little fox kit. And there is also so in the first one, there's also in Wolf Wilder, there's a war going on sort of in the background. And same thing with Pax, there's an unnamed war going on in the background. And Peter's father has to go to be in the war. And so Peter is sent to live with his grandfather. And in going to live with his grandfather, he can't keep Pax the fox with him. So the fox is set off to live in the woods and fend for itself. And then Peter is with the grandfather. And so the whole book is an adventure, again, going from hundreds of miles from point A to point B. So, but while Peter is trying to find his best friend, his love, the fox Pax is also trying to get back to Peter. Now, Pax has been domesticated. He lives in the home. He doesn't know how to fend for himself in the wild as a wild fox. So you've got him and the wolf or the fox and his challenges of trying to survive in the wild and get back to his boy. And you've got the boy trying to deal with his grandfather and these fierce, harsh landscapes trying to get back to the fox. So the book is alternating chapters of the fox's point of view of trying to get back to Peter, and then Peter's point of view of trying to be reunited with this fox. So just really the writing is a little bit different. The Wolf Wilder was a faster read for me. And I think I liked Wolf Wilder better than Pax, if I can say so. That's kind of a last minute decision. But I adore both books. They're really fun. If adults or kids or teens are into adventure stories with these really strong characters, or if you like reading stories about animals, these are they're great read likes. I don't think they talk to each other. I was reminded of each other since I read them so close together, but they're independent, even though there's a backdrop of war and there's a 12-year-old on an adventure with an animal. They're just really great books. I'm really, really glad I read them. So that is Pax and the Wolf Wilder. Christopher, what did you bring?
Well, first, what a wonderful episode. It's great to hear this other way of looking at books, and I'm really enjoying this. The 2 books that I chose that were in conversation with each other are How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr, and also Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. First of all, I was reading How to Hide an Empire recently, and it's all about the United States empirical reach from Puerto Rico, Guantanamo Bay, Hawaii, the Philippines, Micronesia, US Virgin Islands, et cetera, et cetera. And Erik Larson in Devil in the White City really tells two stories, which is the United States' first serial murderer, as well as the story of the World's Fair in Chicago held in 1893. So the way these two books are in conversation with each other is, first, I was reminded of Devil in the White City when I was reading How to Hide an Empire, because both books pull in such disparate threads of our culture and explain such common everyday items. So in Devil in the White City, we find out the origin of the Ferris wheel and Wrigley gum and the what's called the snake charmer song, and also the zipper and electricity, and on and on and on. And in How to Hide an Empire, we learn about the origin of manila folders. People of my generation will remember hearing that in school. And we also hear about Kilroy, the origin of that, probably also lost on younger generations. And he pulls in other cultural threads like Laura Ingalls Wilder and Dr. No from James Bond, and it goes on and on. These are some of my very favorite kinds of historical books. They're both fast reads, they're fascinating, and they touch on so many cultural things. However, they're really in conversation because they both feature this kind of globalism and this colonial worldview. There's an architect that shows up in both of the books, and in How to Hide an Empire, Immerwahr even talks about the Chicago World's Fair because they both touch on such similar themes. So the architect Burnham was the master planner behind the World's Fair in 1893, but then he went on to produce the plan for the cities in the Philippines after the US took it over. So there's a real thematic overlap there. And I was just constantly reminded of Devil in the White City while I was reading How to Hide an Empire. What I really wanted to pick was a fictional book from Puerto Rico or Hawaii or the Philippines, but I wasn't able to find something that really fit for my reading, but I'm still looking for something good for that. So there you have it. We've got a lot of books in this episode, and we would love to hear what books are in conversation for you. So you can post your thoughts in the comments below, and we will be back next time with another Bibliophiles. Thanks for watching.